Understanding player value, rookie pick value, and a key point in time here leading up to the NFL draft for our rookie drafts and our dynasty teams. That and more this week on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, a lot of people think you got to pick a rookie with your selections coming up in your league's annual draft, but you have options every single step of the way. And understanding historical value as well as those veteran and rookie values are key to making the right decisions.
Yeah, and I think this is the time of year where we're tracking mock drafts. We were just having some conversations before, where guys might land, those sorts of things. I think the overall takeaway that I would have from this is kind of understand at different points in your draft, right? When you're looking at your picks right now, don't think about as the player as much as, or don't think about 109 as a specific player. Think about it as a specific profile, right? First, is it a first round wide receiver, right? Is it a day 2 running back, right? Do you think you start kind of adding those up and you can say, okay, first round receiver, first round running back, second round running back, maybe top 10 quarterback, right? Is that a top 15 pick at tight end, depending on the format, right? You start kind of looking at that and you can kind of get an idea of where they are, right? And then the beauty of it is to kind of value, and especially in the second round, you start tracking those things. You can really kind of value the player that you're going to get there with the veteran, right? So kind of understand the idea of where you're going to be kind of mid first. What are you thinking? Right, 4 or 5 receivers, right? 3 or 4 quarterbacks kind of going in that range in super flex, right? A couple of tight ends depending on your format. And then you can kind of see about where you think those lines of a fall off might be, but also understand kind of the hit rates there and the corresponding hit rates with your veterans. I think there's a lot of value to be had doing this type of work at this time of year.
Yeah. And one player that I've been thinking about, because he's sliding a little bit in Dynasty ADP market value here, and for good reason. They brought in Sam Darnold. They also have Brock Purdy, where week 1 ambiguity, I think, is the name of the game for Trey Lance. And he was once well in top 10. Now he's fading to the mid-teens there. And so entering a critical year 3. And so understanding that of saying you have options. You still have, it's not like he's quarterback 30 and you say borderline, worthless to some degree in the marketplace. Someone's going to take a spec shot and you're just going to hold. But he has tangible flip value. And I think so understanding, we talk about things like whether it's breakout rate, base rate, you can put a lot of different monikers on it. But I've said before that you get to a critical mass point for these quarterbacks. And Trey Lance, year 3, pretty much you get to year 4 and it's a 0. Your breakout rate turns to a speck of dust blowing away in the tumbleweeds. So you have to be really careful where, like you said, you're putting them into buckets with draft pedigree. You're looking at what their career start is and looking at that obviously from the start of their career. But Trey Lance is one that I wanted to point out, and I think a lot of people don't know, and Trey Lance is a good one to go over there. You can see how he's valued across rookie picks as well as what the recommendations would be to work a deal if you're out. You say, man, there's a lot of smoke here. It's going to turn to fire. And that's Dan Hendry over at Football Guys, his Dynasty trade value chart. He has one that now you can customize it to format. You can also look at the rookie pick values for Superflex or for Start 1. And for Trey Lance is one that, again, assessing the market and seeing what your options are, because I think a lot of people, they look at it in quarterbacks with veterans versus those rookies with non-101 picks. That was one of the things that opened my eyes, was that that really elite ceiling, the 101s have it a lot longer. It's a lot stickier. It's a lot higher probability compared to other higher round 1 picks with pedigree. That's one thing. They hit, top 12 a lot. The floors might be similar. But when you look at that elite ceiling, so you need to kind of assess what's the format, where are they on my roster, and all those factors. But again, Dan Hendry does a great job. He has monthly updates in the offseason, and I would direct people there over there at Football Guys.
Yeah, and and you can also look at our rankings, right? We have rankings up 4 quarterbacks and the like I'm interested. He's, I think, one of the biggest ones for me. Like if I was sitting here as a listener and not doing the show and I had Trey Lance, like I would pause the show and I'd go try and trade him. Like that's the alarm level. And he's still valued at, I mean, he is quarterback 13 in our rankings. Like I would be like, you can have that, like, and I could cash it out in a number of different forms and I'm good, because I could really see this. Like John Lynch all but said Brock Purdy is their starter.
They've done everything else, right? They just brought in, you hear, I mean, I heard Greg Cosell over this past week on a spot talk about Sam Darnold. This is a scenario with Sam Darnold. Can we not see if Brock Purdy can work out, if Jimmy Garoppolo can work out, if Kyle Shanahan can make chicken noodle soup out of chicken, that he can make this work? And to say that Sam Darnold couldn't work, that he couldn't have his best time, whatever that is, whatever that ceiling is of working out, looking functional, you can certainly do that in the 49ers offense. So the starting role is so valuable here. And like you said, they have done everything in their power to say, Trey Lance, not really liking the trajectory this is on. We don't like where this ride is going, and we're looking to get off. So regardless of what they paid, that price is gone. And the fact that in Dynasty he's so sticky, it's unbelievable to not see. I saw a Trey Lance plus deal for an elite quarterback. Trey Lance can get you places. He still has name cachet, and that could drive. If he's not the week 1 starter, Jordan, I tend to think that is a huge. We're going to get indicators before that, I'm sure. But if he is actually not the starter on week 1, and he is healthy, I mean, where are we headed at that point?
I mean, at that point, like if Trey Lance isn't the week 1 starter for San Francisco, like Trey Lance or Mac Jones going forward, right? Like Mac Jones is at 25 in our ranks right now. You know, like that's
where he's headed.
Yes.
A guy that's uncertain, and Mac Jones, at least Mac Jones probably has a better shot to be the week 1 starter. If you're looking for someone that's playable, someone that is a warm body under center, Mac Jones has higher probabilities. He has more outs. He has less depth chart pressure. It's just, when I see players like that, especially it's the quarterback where you say, what have they done to deserve this? Mm-hmm. Kenny Pickett's another one for me. Daniel Jones is another one. Like, what are we doing? Daniel Jones at least got paid.
Correct.
Daniel Jones, at least you say that there's some systemic positivity around him at this point with his current team. Man,
yeah.
One of my hot takes for the draft is Hendon Hooker to Pittsburgh. Like just how about we give ourselves some outs for 2024 if things aren't trending the right way in year 2. So
yes, yeah. But yeah, this is a great, like I started it. I'm working. I was actually working on it today. I'm starting to work on a series that I do. I think this will be the 3rd year that I've done it, but I use grinding the mocks data. I'm going to incorporate some betting market data, kind of like look at landing spots and look at teams and what they might be doing landing spot wise, and then what should that say about the existing players. So like for example, Tyler Algier in Atlanta, right? What's the sort of odds? What's the market say? Right, that's right in the Bijan zone, right?
Yeah, when you say Tyler Algier, do you mean Trey Mason?
Yeah, Trey Mason, the verb. Yet
we're gonna get to the draft and be like, where did this come from? well, we're talking about it right now, a month in advance. So right, like you said, I mean, we were saying, how does a top 5 player? Most people view Bijan Robinson, take out positional value, but a top 5 player in the draft. Right. How does a top 5 player not make sense at 8 or 10 or 12? Or the point is earlier
as much as anybody else. Right?
Earlier, a team that wants to add to the position. They've said it. They've hit us over the head with a hammer.
Yes.
Don't be surprised.
Yes.
And yet, plenty of people will be surprised. Holding Tyler Algier. Exactly.
Yeah. Grenade.
It's a bad grenade. Right? We talk about human hand grenade. Latavius Murray is the good version. April security, May showers is how it goes. I mean, the value is just going to fall from the sky with someone Tyler Algier.
Yes. Yeah.
And another player, again, we talk about profiles, and the veteran wide receiver market is a big one because it's a slow moving position. People assume that these year 1 breakouts for the wide receiver position just happen all the time. It still really is year 3. If you're looking at elite ceiling, year 3 and then into year 4. Year 3 is a big one. Year 2 a little bit. Year 1 not so much. So just know that going into these picks that you're making, even round 1 guys, top 10 guys, you can see flashes, but in terms of making a huge difference for your team, just know that. It doesn't mean you can't draft them, but I think looking at that, what can 107 get me? It's going to get me, if that gets me a round 1 pedigreed wide receiver rookie, you're going to have plenty of options in the marketplace, though. Is there not a profile that you should explore, with that pick in a dynasty trade? And just most people don't look at that. So this is a key conversation to really hit people over the heads with over and over again. Make sure you're thinking about this when you get to early May. You have rookie fever, but you got to know things like breakout rates. You've got to know probabilities to know that even if you like this guy, it still may not happen for 24 months. And how much could you have helped your team before then?
Yeah. I'm actually writing something this week, and I was looking at some Kelsey trades, and my goodness, like the picks that are in that range that you can give for Kelsey, and almost like in tight end premium, honestly, in start 1, it's a good investment because like you're looking for difference makers. Like he's the ultimate difference maker at that position. Like it's interesting when you start sort of shopping around, get an idea of what's available, what you're kind of looking for. And and you got to be careful, right? You have to be, if you're in a start 1 format and you're sitting at 108, 107, 108, 109, something like that, you should be trying to contend, but at the same point, like that's probably a player you're not expecting right away, right? You're not expecting a contribution for them right away. And if you get it, that's great, but that is more like that's found money as opposed
It's
to
high variance, right? I mean, the occasional massive hit that hits early, often Justin Jefferson. That would be a great example, right? That outcome level on the arc of what's going to happen with a round 1 wide receiver, it was early, it was pronounced Odell Beckham-like. I mean, you rise to the top of the pyramid at NFL and as well as in Dynasty. And I think people remember that and they go, well, you could go, and Dynasty passes slowly. You could do that process where, later first, I'm going to take a round 1 wide receiver. Great plan. And you could go 5 classes in a row and roll snake eyes 4 times, get a marginal player the other, that finishes a wide receiver 30 in year 2. And yet, you're still chasing that Justin Jefferson type outcome of it happens every once in a while,
right?
Of being early, pronounced, impactful, and you're just rolling from there. It's found money. And actually Henry in the chat mentions Amon-Ra St. Brown. And yes, he's a heck of a pick, when you look at his early day 3 pedigree. But to be fair, I mean, that type of outcome is what, a 10% type bet. I mean, it's low. 5. Yeah. Especially being that early in his career, right? It's not year 3, it's not year 4. And the thing I always say, the time value, you could have been the smartest guy in the room. You drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if in year 1, he doesn't pop enough, when guys like that cycle and hit in year 3, they're not on their original team unless you're on a dynasty roster with decent taxi rules that you're going to be able to stash them for a while. You really love the player. There's certain circumstances, but otherwise they're on someone else's team. You don't have the patience. You draft some guy like that in the 3rd round. I'm sorry. Like the odds of them making it to following year week 1 is not overly high. And frankly, it's not a prudent decision in most instances to hold that player. So you have to be super, super careful. And I think, again, I talked about Jefferson, but someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown is another good example of now people think, oh, yeah, just, Stephon Diggs, and you keep rambling off the outliers. And if you're not focused on the historical rates, you can get yourself in trouble by saying, well, I got one right. I'm going to go 3 for 4 over the next couple of rookie drafts.
Yeah. Do you want to hear? We could do a dramatic reading of the 4th round wide receivers drafted in the last 3 years. Antonio Gandy Golden, Gabe Davis, Jacob Harris, Tylan Wallace, Jalen Darden, Dez Fitzpatrick.
These are a lot of guys picked in rookie drafts too. If everyone's just glossing through and be like, oh, irrelevant guys, no one picked them. No, they picked them. Dez Fitzpatrick got picked.
Absolutely. Calvin Austin, right? Romeo Dobbs, Eric Uzakma from Miami. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Can I ask you?
That's a pretty grim, right? That's a 1 out of, what is that? I think there's
right.
There's
well, let's compare 2 things though. I think a lot of people view, if you were to ramble off that list, but if you also say round 4 pedigree, Gabe Davis is a very strong outcome, correct?
Yes.
Historically speaking. So.
Yes.
But let's turn this around. How much has he mattered?
Correct. Not a ton.
Macro, not a ton. Again, he's had moments where you could turn him into something else that could matter a lot, but he himself has not mattered all that much.
Correct.
So he's on the upper band of outcomes, and yet still the actual brass tacks, let's get to the finish line, not much.
Right.
And there's a lot of talk, Buffalo's going to add something, this offseason. So
Right.
what would that do? So you have to be super careful. And I think, the profiles that every offseason we talk about quarterback, but we talk about wide receiver. And you mentioned, one of your recent posts over there at Footballguys talking about wide receiver moves to make. You cover dynasty trading regularly over there on the site. And two specific profiles, Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, these are options out there in the marketplace. And if you're not tuned in, and again, Jordan makes recommendations, he goes into the marketplace, that it's all about giving someone else the paints. They're going to make the portrait, in their own league. We can't go in there and make the offers. But just knowing about price points and about sagging profiles like Samuel, like Keenan Allen, all of a sudden you can embolden and empower dynasty GMs out there to go out there and explore at certain price points.
Yeah. By the way, you were talking about Jefferson and about how big of a hit he is. Just remember that he was the wide receiver 4 at best in that class. Okay. Henry put in, I drafted Rager over Jefferson 3 times. I did as well. I think you did as well. Right. Like he was not. And again, it was Rager, Judy, Lamb tier break. Okay. And it was a tier break, and Jefferson looked a lot more like Ayuk in terms of cost than he did those other 3 guys. He almost never got into that top 3 tier of him and those other guys. So again, even like they happen, we are terrible at predicting them, right? Like we are, and again, you and I do a lot of work on this, right? And but it's very, very, very difficult to get those.
Well, and look at that pick. If you had traded that pick, and again, that was 2 years ago, correct?
Yes.
No, 3, 2.
It was 2020. Yeah.
Okay, so 3 seasons ago, let's say you traded that pick 108, whatever it was, right in that zone for Mike Evans. Mm-hmm. So again, did you get a Justin Jefferson outcome? No. But what you did is you prevented the Jalen Reagor. You have probably over that course of time paced or better CeeDee Lamb. You've easily surpassed Jerry Jeudy in that zone. You've surpassed Brandon Ayuk. The point is, there was one guy unequivocally that bested trading that for Mike Evans. Just picking one player that probably was in that price point because he was a little bit older. Mm-hmm. But it's just the wide receiver position is the one that I'll tell you, Jordan, the longer I go, the less I view them as when I make a pick in rookie drafts. I like the price point. I've probably explored other options. Mm-hmm. And I view them as completely ancillary in terms of I'm putting them over there. They're one of the last wide receivers on my depth chart. Minimal expectations for production in the short term. Literally a practice squad type designation on my team that I like them, but I also have reasonable expectations in the first year or two of how many times they're in my lineup and mattering. And that's something wildly different from 5 years ago. But the more times you look at this every offseason, it's different names. Sometimes it's names from last year that are even cheaper. But it's just, again, I mean, when I was reading your stuff and seeing Deebo Samuel and some of these price points you can get for a situation that could be changing in flux and liquid with Brandon Ayuk's gone, how does Deebo Samuel look now? So you have a lot of possibilities and a lot of outs beyond just good player, mid-career, and someone that we've seen strong play from already.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so funny because even like in that Evans trade, in your hypothetical, right? The guys that would have scared you, Jefferson would not have been one of them, right? Like if you were going to trade Evans for a receiver, like you would have.
It was probably Lamb and Judy in that group that you were like, oh, he's definitely going to be better than Mike Evans over the next 3 years.
Correct. It wouldn't have been Jefferson that you would have picked to burn them. And I think that's a very useful. It's a very useful example.
You probably use that class all the time to reference as an example, right? Because you go, yes. you go. I mean, the two Ayuk was a value. He was fading far too. He was the last guy of that group, and then you have Jefferson, typically the one right before that in the late first and early second of that grouping, and those were two pretty good outcomes when you look at that comparatively.
And by the way, like that's true at wide receiver. It's true at running back. It's true amongst top 10 quarterbacks. By the way, there was a scenario in that class where you could have traded Clyde Edwards-Helaire Okay, for the picks, for picks later in that first, and maybe even netted a future first, and you could have legitimately taken Justin Jefferson, Justin Herbert, and a future first for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's how jacked up that class was. And when you go back and you look at it, I could talk about that class. I could write
Well, you
I could
also
write
could have
25 pages on that class.
If someone
right?
wanted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you could have probably drafted to the Jonathan Taylor spot, and maybe you pick up 112 or 201. And if that's Ayuk, if that's Jefferson, but you're right there in the crosshairs.
Correct.
I mean, you could have got both of those and arbitrage down a spot or two at most at the top of the board. It's just, it's
right. And I think it's important too, kind of going back to what we talked about, kind of having in your mind, right, where those kind of tiers are. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to make a deal right now, but sort of be mindful of it. I always like to slide down when I'm on the clock play, especially if I can kind of net a veteran in the process and pick up a pick, it kind of slide down, try and stay within tiers and all that stuff. But even if you went in that class and you said, I have the Jonathan Taylor pick, whether it's at 1 or 2 or 3, wherever you were sort of in that. And I would say Jonathan Taylor, Burrow's been a little bit behind him. I'd say Jonathan Taylor's probably been the most impactful player from that class. You could nitpick Burrow. I think the same holds. If you had taken that pick and you could have absolutely gotten, you went back in the draft and gotten Justin Herbert and Justin Jefferson. Again, they turned out right, but I think it's really important because when you look within a round, right? So amongst second round running backs, we don't get them right? We don't predict better than random how they're going to perform in their career. The same thing is true for the order of in the round. So all of that's to say, as you said, as I sort of go along more and more, I always think of the phrase, instead of trying to pick a guy, I'm just trying to take a guy.
Pick a type.
Take a type,
Take
a type. And that's especially true at wide receiver. I'll play a little bit with running backs. That has gotten me burned in recent years with San Francisco guys. I think it's just going to be not San Francisco guys. Anyone but a San Francisco running back will probably be the lesson that I learned from that. But I do think, again, especially at wide receiver, instead of trying to pick the one, take a type, right? Take that type. And be inside the line, right? And never trading up for wide receiver.
Well, yeah, and it's taking the value, right? I mean, that you sit there and you go, let's see what the board looks like. Like for example, Trey Sermon is always a great litmus test. You alluded to it just there, that he was a round 3 guy. He wasn't a round 2 running back. And that does say something. And yet you sit there at a certain point in round 1, and it wasn't 112, that you go, oh, let's go Trey Sermon right here. And so that was anointing an outcome that's like, I need Trey Sermon to be better than a typical round 3 running back because of the price I'm paying. Instead of saying round 2 running backs are dry, there's the other profiles that aren't there, and saying I'm not going to force it at 106. I'm going to trade down. And if that means, I still remember where I got off of N'Keal Harry. It was like a 102 in that class or whatever. And it was like, I could not trade down for the life of me. And I remember at the time, I took an egregiously small amount. And the egregiously small amount, after exploring dozens of offers, was something like getting 202 in that class. Jimmy Graham, because I was really light at tight end. And again, this was years ago. So he was still very viable. And then getting a first the following year, which turned into, I mean, obviously the pick itself ended up being better. 202 ended up being better. Everything was better. But it was just at 102, I was like, I don't see the value of drafting the 32nd overall pick for a team that hasn't got wide receiver. Again, there's some narrative stuff, but the point is, he was almost a second round pick. And it's like, I can't validate. It's a weaker class. I didn't like the value of N'Keal Harry, and I just got out of there. So that's one example of just, you have more options than just like, oh, I think this is a little light, but I reset the clock and I got a future pick. So that was a first that could end up being anywhere. And I can't remember where it was, but the point is, you just got out of there and you reset it to say, I don't want to make a decision right now. We talk about doing a startup draft in January, and how taking rookie picks, just blind rookie picks of like, okay, I don't really have a good take on a veteran target here. I'll take 105. Okay. A couple rounds later, I'll take 110. I'll take 203 here. Because you're just saying, I want to delay making a decision, as opposed to making one that might light on fire by the NFL draft. And frankly, people doing a startup over the next 3 weeks, starting, pretty soon here, just keep that in mind, that you don't want to burn picks. You don't want to pick something in round 4 that turns into round 10 in 3 weeks. Be very careful. And that's why insulation when you're doing pre-NFL draft startups is very, very important. And one other player I would mention is Tony Pollard. He was a key player over at Footballguys. We talked about our free agency dynasty running back rising players. And Tony Pollard is another one where they may be boxed out of Bijan Robinson in the first round. But how about this profile? I mean, 26, he's finally coming off a pronounced year. Zeke is no longer there. All positivity. But we're talking about a 26-year-old that's on a 1-year deal, and he's going through an injury. He needs to get healthy to get to week 1. Is Dallas going to have full allegiance in Tony Pollard? Is this going to be a 1-year play? He's 26. So I know running back is treacherous, but he's in the top 15 or so of the position. He's one that scares me. And I get the rising part. There's been some positivity with what's occurred this offseason with him overall. But I think you also have to navigate that versus the market.
Yeah. And like all those risks are there, right? I mean, all those risks. He's on basically a 1-year proven deal coming off an injury. How great do you feel about that? Like,
Dallas can't feel great, right?
No,
I mean, they're going to address something. I mean, to say that the depth chart today is going to be the same as week 1.
Right. And it's funny too, because you start looking at him against other players sort of in that range. Like Javonte Williams is in that range. Najee Harris sort of in that range. Derrick Henry, right? Like if you, and this is like an interesting one again, I don't know what the trade market would necessarily be if you could get a plus there, but it's interesting to think about, right? Left in their career, who would you take, Pollard or Henry? Because you're coming off an injury with Pollard, like there's a chance that Henry still has a smash season left in him, and that could dust. If Pollard's is slow to get back, and then doesn't really ever sort of land a lead job, right? But you're already looking at some of the dangers of these guys, right? And on top of the fact that he's highly susceptible to being for them drafting somebody.
Well, they're all in the danger zone, right? I mean, you get to a certain point, and you're talking about types where you're looking for one big year, right? Maybe the older running back where obviously at that age, there's risk that you get 1 more or 0 more. And, guys like Pollard, it could be Mixon, could be Aaron Jones, it could be Alvin Kamara, it could be Derrick Henry. But you put all these guys in buckets, and it's Dalvin Cook is falling through the floor. I got him for almost nothing, Jordan. And I'm not even a big Dalvin Cook fan, but I'm like, I'm here for this. Like, I'm here for nearly free. And so I think you have to not build up walls and say certain players are off limits. I named a lot of ugly profiles right there at running back for a lot of people that say, I want nothing to do with any of those guys. But if you say you want nothing to do with them, the team that has them right now might want nothing to do with them. You're saying you wouldn't trade 210 for Alvin Kamara? Like, you have to have prices on players and profiles that say, you don't understand the risk of that pick you're trading away turning into absolutely nothing. And so even if you think Kamara's getting suspended for half the year and you say he's 28, he's still a pretty good player. So to say that some probably day 3 or the least optimal day 2 running back goes there, and you think that career arc is better than Kamara from this point forward, again, dig a little more is what I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara. We've got the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And I want to remind you, we've been talking about the content over there. And signing up, you get a 12-month rolling membership at footballguys.com. Outlined a few of the features we have on the Dynasty side. It's been expanded quite a bit. Whether you play DFS, Dynasty, redraft season coming up. But things turn on. There's been a ton of content. But after the NFL draft is where the red zone, the green zone, going to make that money this year, that ROI on your dynasty portfolio comes into play. So you want to sign up at footballguys.com/dynasty winners. Got some good trades this week, some high-powered ones and some wide receiver ones. Let's start off with Justin Jefferson. So Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase are the two guys where you could basically say, like some of the top quarterbacks, did I get enough? Mm-hmm. So we got Justin Jefferson, 301. We can throw that out. We got Devontae Adams on the other side, 106, 107, 204. I'm going to keep adding nickels, Jordan, but it really doesn't make a difference here. It's half PPR, 1 quarterback. So the picks, we've talked about this in recent shows, not quite as juicy as the Superflex.
Yeah. So my usual saying on these is, right, there's a couple of things that I believe at the wide receiver position. Number one, that you can get discounted production, that's discounted by age. right? So there is a chance that Adams can pace Jefferson this year and maybe next year, something like that. Then it's going to be a fall off. But you have to be careful when you are adding a bunch of assets to a receiver that can pace a higher priced receiver in the short term, right? Where he can pace them. You got to be really careful about adding a bunch of assets to that player to go up at the position. And that's a very fraught strategy, because what you're doing is you are locking up assets into non-scoring values, right? To things that do not score in your lineup. Okay. And I think Adams is the type of player that can score with Jefferson. And if that's going to be true, right, you're basically trading 2 firsts and a second to basically lock up a higher priced, younger, right? Again, I love Justin Jefferson. He's my clear one. But you start doing that, and all of a sudden what you see is your roster has a lot of guys at the top of it that are sort of young and productive, but what you've done is stripped out, you've stripped out a lot of usability in the 4 through 8 range of your roster, and that's the caution that I would have just on these types of trades generally. Justin Jefferson's in a different world, but like you see sometimes where people do this for CeeDee Lamb. Basically anyone not named Jefferson or Chase, you see people do this, and I always shake my head because I'm like, what you're doing is you're locking up assets into things that are not improving your lineup. And that's to me, that's a very cautionary one. Although I think with this one, you're not probably giving up a difference. You're giving up Adams, but probably not a difference maker at those picks, right? So that's the interesting part here.
Yeah, the interesting part for me, and again, 6-year difference and the insulation factor, even if we accelerate a couple seasons, we say Adams was close-ish, to make this competitive. Then at that point, you're going to talk about, you burn 24, 25. So age 26 season for Justin Jefferson at that point. So still firmly insulated for at least till age 28, 29 before we see any age impacted erosion to his dynasty value, his flexibility, career arc, all that stuff. And Davante Adams by that point is going to be 32, 33. You're kind of hoping for maybe an Adam Thielen plus, right? At that point, I mean, you're looking for a guy that he's devolved from an auto start to maybe a wide receiver 2-3 in your lineup. Someone that is, still depth, but aging depth, one that you're probably not going to trade at that point. But what I like about this deal is Adams' high end upside. So you're not trading it for, I mean, you could mention another older wide receiver that doesn't quite have the same pop. I'm trying to look here. I mean, I don't think DeAndre Hopkins, for example, has quite that ceiling. I'm dropping way down, but I'm just giving examples of guys that don't have the same allure, as Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs or Davante Adams. Those are some of the preemptive older wide receivers that can provide that I can get close enough to Jefferson. And what I like, though, is the 106, 107, that gets you a lot of stuff. And I know, most listeners probably know I was going there, that you get those picks. So you have Adams. I mean, how much could you bolster your lineup? Like if you were to, I think you could trade 106 and have a decent shot to trade that straight up for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I traded Pickens in 110 for Tyreek Hill. So I'm pretty certain that 105, 106, somewhere in that range can get you close. I mean, and you also got 204. So I'm sure you could play trade 106 and
Pickens at 103. So, you got to.
Yeah, but adding 204 to one of those picks and getting a Tyreek Hill, getting a Stephon Diggs. So now you're getting 2 wide receivers in there, Jordan.
Yeah.
And now you're saying now it's 2-on-1.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people are saying, well, you're going to sit there, you're going to draft a day 2 running back at 106, at 107, you're going to draft a round 1 wide receiver. Who knows what you're going to get from that? So you're getting Adams and now question marks. But if you turn those picks into some combination, like if you add Tyreek Hill and now you trade 107, let's say, of those all the remaining picks, and you say you can even take an upside shot. I mean, 107, that could be an incoming rookie, but you could maybe turn that into Brandon Ayuk. Maybe you turn that into Treylon Burks. Maybe you turn that into Christian Watt. You see what I'm saying? Like you can actually get 3 bites here with a young guy that could turn out. And then you say you have 2 older guys that now it's 2-on-1. I mean, you're playing double coverage against Justin Jefferson for a couple of years here.
Yeah. This is a way to open up a 2-way go. So like you have the ability, and if you're going to trade a guy like this, I think it makes a lot of sense to do it in this way where you're opening up a 2-way go. You could say, okay, I can kind of pace him for now. Again, he might beat me, but I think of it this way. Like as you were kind of talking, I just kept coming back to, if you look at 106 and 107 plus that second, Like that is about, right, when you look over the next 3 years, that is equal to about, those picks, if you added up their warp value, so that's wins over replacement. If you sort of added those up, that would be about 2 wins over the next 3 years. Okay. So what you're doing is you say, okay, like if Adams kind of paces Jefferson over the next 2 years, what you've then done is sort of push those picks, right? The advantage that Jefferson has to run up for you is way out into the future, and it's big time discount. You know what I mean? So I started looking at that and started thinking about, how those picks are kind of valued. Those 2 wins would be pushed way off, I think, with you're doing it Adams. Like, I think there's other ways. I mean, could you trade those 2 picks for Amon-Ra St. Brown? Right? Like, could you trade those 2? Like, could you trade? Is someone like that available for those 2 picks? Right? And then you've opened up a 2-way go. Again, I think Jefferson is much better than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but in the meantime, you got 2 shots at him. You know what I mean?
We're almost doing a money ball thing, right? We're trying to replicate Giambi in the aggregate. And you can kind of do that with the older stud and then the younger player that is just a little bit down from Jefferson, way up there at wide receiver 1 overall.
Yeah. Overall, right. I think this is a rich person's trade. Like, this is a rich team trade, right? You don't make this trade if you're not elite, right? You make this trade because you're awesome. And what you're trying to do is consolidate that value into Justin Jefferson. You don't do this unless you're that, right? I think
it's a luxury trade, right? Yeah, on the other side, it's a luxury deal to say I have 3 or 4 top 20 type players, and it's a 1 quarterback. So again, you probably have some studs at running back. You feel pretty good. Jefferson obviously would slot up at the top, but you probably got a couple other strong wide receivers. Maybe you got a Kelsey, and this is one where you just go, hey, I've gotten a lot out of Adams. Not that 106, 107 aren't making your roster or anything, but you just say, those guys are going to sit. Let me get a stud. Let me insulate myself with my top 4, 5, 6 players. Jefferson certainly among those in the coming years. All right, we got FFPC 1 quarterback. We got the cut down date behind us. And so these are trades made after those keeper selections. We got T. Higgins and 1 quarterback traded for 111 and a 24 first.
Picks.
Higgins doesn't fit the bar, right? Of saying, let me trade 2 firsts.
No.
Right.
No, he just, that's
the ceiling, right? I mean, the ceiling has not been shown and proven and there. And if he stays in Cincinnati, the longer he stays in Cincinnati, the more it's not really there. He would need to change teams, and then you'd have to see it.
Yeah, and like I was looking at some of his metrics because I wasn't sure what to do with him. And one of the things that I found, like I have this stat called targets per open route run, which is basically targets per route run when you just take out all the contested stuff. And he doesn't rank like that. You see that jumps out, like the elite guys jump out at that stat, and you don't see it there with him. And so that kind of gave me a bit of pause about if he got traded, something like that, if just hypothetically, if the Giants decided to go out and trade for him and he becomes a wide receiver 1, what does that kind of look like? Right, those numbers, right, the targets per open route run, signal to me that like tight end or like wide receiver 2, sort of high end wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1, sort of in that range would be kind of like a ceiling of what I would expect. And I don't think locking up 2 firsts, again, it's a future first, right? Like I think again, you can probably with 111, if done right, you can pace T. Higgins, right? You can use that to trade. Is that Keenan Allen plus, right? Like you can sort of and again, you can sort of slide down, right? That's a great way to slide down, try and replicate T. Higgins in the short term, and then you got the future first as liquidity.
Yeah. Last point I would say about FFPC is even though you see generally seconds, thirds, mid-round picks discounted heavily in the format, which I understand, they are very close to the cut line, the end of your roster line, the waiver line in that format. First still carry weight. So even if that's 111 versus 203, might not be a big difference in what you're looking at with the pick. It's a big difference in terms of trading power and leverage going after somebody because it's a first versus not a first, especially that 24, which we've said before that the way picks are allocated, you actually have to be a decent team. So you could look at that and go, oh, that's a playoff first. Well, the good news is with a playoff first, if they happen to just miss, it has a much better chance of getting through the funnel of the toilet bowl, the consolidation bracket, and actually becoming a high first as opposed to 104, 105, 106. So that would be the good news sometimes with trading with stronger teams. If they get a couple injuries, they end up missing the playoffs. They could end up being the perfect storm of actually end up being the high first there. It's kind of backwards of what some of the other leagues and formats would be. All right, we got one more here, and it's the same kind of concept with Justin Jefferson that we talked about, where you're trading what we have seen with strong production for a package that is it a two-way go. It's a 10-teamer, one quarterback with Cooper Kupp being traded for Calvin Ridley, 107 and 210.
See, this is different to me because I don't trust Ridley to replicate Kupp. Right. So this is different for me in the lens of like Adams. This is different for me in the lens of Adams and Jefferson because I don't trust Ridley to replicate Kupp. So that's how this is different. Right. Again, I still think there's a lot of value on the other side of this. The question is are you then able to turn Ridley into something that, looks that you feel much better about, where if I don't feel great about Ridley, do I just look at this trade and say Ridley's an asset? I can finagle that. I mean, that's probably the angle that you would look at this and say, if you were trying to extract value from this, it's probably a good bet in that direction. But I wouldn't want to, if I was going to take the Ridley side of this, I would not want to sit on this package. Because we're going exactly what we just talked about. You're drafting a guy that's probably a developmental option, and you don't know what you have in Ridley. I don't know what I have in Ridley. He hasn't played football in 2 years, and
the last time we saw him was not great. If you remember, he played partial season, definitely less than half, and it was not good. He looked like he was walking through stuff. He's also older than you think. I think he's 28.9, somewhere right around there for week 1 this year, and they brought back Evan Ingram. They've got Christian Kirk, who performed well last year. So to pretend like he's going to just run roughshod through that depth chart. Now, we have seen strong production from him in the past, but I think you got to be careful, like Michael Thomas and others, of saying if it's been a while since you've seen it, the assumption that it's coming all the way back. Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham, you got to be careful with guys like that, especially when they get long in the tooth and late in the career arc. Yeah, I agree on that. Cooper Kupp and a 10-teamer, right? It's all about who can spike. And Cooper Kupp, we've seen massive spikes. It feels like he's underrated, and he's going to be underrated in those shallow formats, especially in mid-teens, maybe even closer to a wide receiver 20. Some big discounts going on there on the assumption that Rams are horrible, Stafford's going to retire or break, and that this connection, this run, is going to end abruptly, and Cooper Kupp is going to erode right now. So a lot of times you can get discounts. I mean, we see that with older quarterbacks, but I think it applies to the Rams at large, and that connection of Stafford and Kupp, especially as two relevant portions of that offense, of saying, they're running them out to pasture, and they're almost planning. The price point is almost with such a high probability that you're going to get almost nothing. That means, I mean, if you get the payoff and things are actually good, last year was an outlier year and that connection is right there, then you're going to pay off big dividends on Stafford front, which is like QB 30, and then here with Cooper Kupp and deep in the teens.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, finished now here. We got some quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum, and I thought this was a good one. I think I've mentioned a quote like this, but came across another sequence, which is, I've made a ton of really, really great trades. I have made a ton of really, really awful trades. I remember only the awful ones.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, it's funny. And again, I think the value of that is like, learn the lesson, right? Why did you miss? And someone asked me recently, like, I missed on this trade. What did I do wrong? And it was some version of like, they pivoted off of last year. They pivoted off of Jonathan Taylor for like Swift and a first. And I said, the thing you did wrong is that Swift wasn't good, right? Like, I don't think that was, that wasn't a process mistake. It was an outcome. It was an outcome error, And so I think, like, understanding why you missed, right? If you make the right decisions and you're applying the right, you're applying the right strategies and doing the work and doing the right process, you're still not going to, like, you still might win only 60% of your trades.
Well, if you go stud profile, right? So the other thing was they went to 2 high variables, right? And Jonathan Taylor was coming off of running back 1. He's younger. He's not 27. Like, there wasn't a lot, and not that last year worked out well. Obviously, a little bit of a down year. He got injured as well, but he's still, on the mid band of his prime productive window. And Swift, like you said, had never done it. You're banking on the first. So like, that was ripe with a lot of things can go wrong, even though you have two pieces coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean Swift at that point was still like a top 6-7 running back.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like it wasn't. Like that was a reasonable trade to do. Again, I kind of moved off Swift in some other ways, but like I didn't mind the idea of taking a first on top of a running back that looked, probably lesser than Jonathan Taylor, but not. You wouldn't have thought it was going to be that extreme, right? I didn't have, I came into last year thinking that Swift had running back 1 in his range of outcomes. So I don't think it was a process error. It just didn't work out for Swift,
Right.
which has been notable.
What a circle of outcomes here. Because the one thing I was thinking was, what if Detroit goes after Bijan Robinson
I've heard
with
that
one of their picks?
speculated. I've heard
No,
that.
but just can you give me 30 seconds on how crazy that would be in terms of they paid David Montgomery. I get the whole address needs, patch holes, and then take best player available in the draft, but they sunk some decent money into David Montgomery. And to just basically light it on fire to bring in Bijan Robinson with a premium pick, in addition to Swift, I mean, they must be like, he must be a top 3 player on their board. Plus, like, oh, we paid David Montgomery, but it's like, if we found something better in the draft, so be it. Like, for me, the team building part is the harder thing to sell because of the Montgomery contract. I know they can get out of it, and it's not like quarterback dead money, but still.
Yeah, I mean, they would instantly become like a very, very dangerous running game.
Oh yeah,
I think wide receivers, and this is actually kind of dovetails back to what we talked about earlier. I think wide receivers plenty in play for them. At what do they? I think they pick 6 and 18. I get them and
yeah,
Seattle confused in terms of
yeah.
the order of those picks. 6 and 18, I think for Detroit, because they didn't make the play. So 6 and 18. Yes, talking myself through this one. Great audio. If they're a potential trade up team, I think that's possible. I have them in a staff mock draft that we're doing, and I wanted to just absolutely hammer down the secondary. Was kind of I had to make an edit to one of my picks. We'll just put it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think like they have a lot of different ways that they could go. I don't think running back's a good play for them, honestly. Like I mean, I don't know. I think they have a lot of other things that they could do. I would rather, if I was going to go surplus pick, I'd rather pick a receiver than I'd rather pick Bijan Robinson personally.
Yeah, no, I agree there. And the other thing is, I think what you said at the beginning, which is we all make bad trades. I would say as you go along, the process should tighten to where the bad outcomes are ones that were very defensible compared to you start in Dynasty and you're bound to make some pretty graphic mistakes. And the learning from it is the big thing, right? I mean, like, if that's in life, if you make a bad relationship choice, if you make a bad financial choice, a bad job choice, then all you can do at that moment is learn from it. So, I mean, I made so many by bad habit. And I think we talk about this about once a year, but my bad habit in dynasty trading used to be chasing the running back production right as I'm getting towards the playoffs. Let me get the healthy guy, the productive guy in season. Let me go get it. And that's back when I wasn't backfilling with enough backups and rookie picks going towards the running back position enough. So there was some connective tissue in terms of what was the problem. But chasing LaShawn McCoy, in week 12 for the playoff run was just the end result sometimes. So you have to go to the cause and effect. But once I identified that by tracking my trades of like, I've done this 3 years in a row in various leagues of like not working out, it didn't get the results and it was bad process. But documenting that has corrected it for now years on end. So I think as long as you correct after observing and examining it, then everything's above board. I mean, we've all traded the best player in the deal and that hasn't worked out, and you end up giving someone up that it turns out to be big time year over year for a while. So I think you got to be really careful about making it just a tattoo on your psyche, because as long as you learn from it, you're bound to play more dynasty seasons. And if you autocorrect that and say, well, that's the one I'm going to eradicate, all of a sudden you're becoming a better dynasty GM.
Yeah, one other, like, I'd also point to a couple other things. Like we talked about, you and I both made this miss. Again, I don't speak for you on this, but I'm almost certain you made this miss. I made this miss. I know I made this miss. Rager over Jefferson in that class. what did I learn from that? Well, there's a couple of things I learned from that. A, what we talked about earlier on, right? When you're in a similar profile, you perform randomly, right? So be very careful about taking one instead of just waiting and taking the fourth one, right? Or
just
trading
mix it,
down.
right? Or just
Right.
mix it. Don't be 90-10. Like be more
Don't
64.
be
Even if you have a
arrogant.
preference, mix it.
Right.
Mix it. If you got 10 leagues
Yeah.
and let's say 7 of them you're in that spot, take your guy, that you're preferential in that exact situation 4 times. Even
Yes.
if it's 5-2,
Yes.
you're at least getting that nice balance, that portfolio mentality of saying. And I remember there was somebody, I did end up with some Jefferson, but I'm trying to think of, there was a non-target guy in recent classes where I ended up with a random share, and it's like, oh, I think it was someone. It wasn't Drake London. I think it was in that class though. But there was someone I mixed in that, this isn't a target player. But instead of going, I've started to work that direction. Even if it's 70-30, you're still getting a little bit of exposure there. And that's important, like you said, of like profiles and like prices.
Yeah. And even with that miss, right? That's a pretty bad miss. I'm missing on the top. I'm missing on the wide receiver one in all of Dynasty. Even with that miss, past 2 years, right? Past 3, I think since then, right? Profitable every year in terms of Dynasty, make, more profit than, making a profit on my teams, and, like 88% the last year, and this past year, 2 years ago, and like this year, north of 100% return, so 100% profit. So, those, even if you miss, right, it doesn't sink you. And I think that's the other takeaway. So figure out why you miss and realize that, like, don't crawl up at a ball and think it's all over for me now that I'm.
Don't have to be perfect. I think that's one of the bigger things. Like even some of your best teams, go back and look at your startup draft, and it's like, just see, especially in the top 100. I mean, the number of times where you're like, I either whiffed or got very little, or look at these 3-4 picks that went 10 picks within the next 10 picks that were all way better. And so even if you look and you're like, I'm one of the best teams in the league, you still did not have that perfect startup draft or that perfect team build and the perfect decision making. It's just not going to happen. We've got, I think, drinking and trading is dangerous to the long-term future of my dynasty teams.
Agreed.
Friends don't let friends drink and trade.
You know what I am careful about? I get all these great wild ideas when I'm on my bike, and then I get off and I'm like, I get a little oxygen back to my brain, and I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't act on that.
What was I thinking?
Right.
Altitude.
Right. I always go with excuse me, I might be oxygen deprived, but how crazy is this idea? And usually people will talk me off the ledge if
that's always good. You got to bounce it off of somebody, and you got to go. Like I still remember, like I was on some painkillers. I was post surgery, and I literally started a phone call to someone deep into the night that I don't know why they picked up. They frankly shouldn't have. But I was there, not in my right frame of mind, and I was doing these recovery walks after my surgery, and I started out by saying, I've got this idea. It's either really great or really stupid. But honestly, whether it's a big dynasty trade, whether you're on the clock and you're going to do something huge in a startup draft, whatever it is. But I think starting out a conversation with someone you trust, some outlet, and saying, this is either going to be really great or really stupid, and being open to both possibilities in that moment. Like you said, the oxygen factor is absolutely real.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we got one more deal. One more quote here. The 201. So this is regarding a trade that they had 201 in the deal, and they said the 201 better turn into something pretty great, referencing a key aspect to their one quarterback deal that they executed.
Yeah, a second rounder should never be key aspects to deals. They should be, and you want to, like, again, coming back to kind of what we talked about earlier on, understanding what you can expect in that range. So historically, I'll give you an idea here. If you're looking, and this is start one data, so actually perfectly applicable. So if you look the average, I sort of split it up into the top half of the second round. So basically picks 1 through 6 of the second round. What are you going to get there? Okay. On average, it's running back selected at 106. This is from a couple of years ago, but it's right. Receiver, it's someone picked at the average is 50 overall. Tight end, it's a late first round, about 24. Careful with the sample size on that; it's pretty small. And the quarterback there, like, it might be, maybe it's a top 10 guy, something like that. But again, that's probably reaching at a non-premium position in that format. So what are you getting there, right? Day 3 running back. I bet you're hoping for a day 2 running back to fall, but you're one of the last day 2 running backs, or some sort of second round wide receiver. That's what you're hoping for in that range. Like those aren't great bets, right? Those are maybe 30% bets. So maybe they hit.
And the key part is 30% from here forward. Again, something spinning it back from early in the show. Correct. Like when you say 30%, I think a lot of people just somehow it gets into their brain that it's like 30% this year.
No.
It's
like maybe
not
10% this year.
Yeah. And depending on the profile and that's where landing spot comes in. And again, you need almost every one of those cases, you're going to need an injury, so can you predict that? Is that really better than some guy that's on your waiver wire right now? Because he needs an injury too. So it may not last all year per se, but the point is they both need something. They're not just probably running with that job. So that's the one thing. Like I think a lot of people superimpose when you put a number on it where you say, this is a 50% hit rate. 50% over the course of 36 months because Dynasty is long, but man, it takes a long time to go 3 years. So your team is going to change over more than half your roster by that point in time. And so waiting on that 50% hit rate in this example scenario, again, you're aggregating it all and kind of, I think we think of it, you're going to recalibrate 6 months from now and you're going to recalibrate next off season for sure, where those odds don't stay the same. So you gotta be super careful with those picks. And 201 in a one quarterback. We've talked about it before. You're taking out 4 quarterbacks from there. It doesn't look as good as super flex. And like you just said, you're looking at not a round 1 wide receiver. You're not looking at probably an optimal day 2 running back. If you're lucky, getting a day 2 running back, and they need an injury. So good luck.
Right.
Good luck, from those things. So, and that's why you got some big deal brewing, and somebody asks you, hey, they're asking for 201, or what should I add to this deal? Yeah, give them 201. Oh, they're asking for 206. Yeah, give them 206. Because you're getting the best player in the deal. You're getting something that tangibly matters, upgrade your lineup, and you're getting a cornerstone profile that, frankly, you're probably not going to have to think about too much. So 206 in that deal, 201 here, doesn't matter. Keep that in mind. All right, jam-packed show here with Jordan McNamara. And we talked about topics that ranged from wide receiver, looking at those two-way go in dynasty trades, looking at those profiles, and looking at rookie pick value versus those veteran profiles, some of the key questions. And this next month, you're going to roll into rookie draft season, and we want to prepare you. We'll talk about some NFL draft this month, but it's also about prepping yourself with what those rookie picks as assets mean in your dynasty trade market. So go to those links that we had and mentioned early on the show, things like the dynasty trade value chart over by Dan Henry at Footballguys, Jordan with his rookie with his wide receiver moves to make, talking about Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, who we didn't mention in this show, and also some risers that you can take advantage of in your trade market, risers and fallers, guys like Tony Pollard there in the dynasty trade and player value marketplace. So that's going to do it for this week. I'm Chad Parsons. He's Jordan McNamara. Until next time, good luck in your dynasty